Good morning, everybody, and welcome to a soggy Silverstone for day 2 of this Silverstone 500 race meeting on the magnificent Silverstone Grand Prix circuit. The weather conditions, unfortunately, less magnificent, really, for this first race of the day, which will be for the Ginetta GT Academy series. It's their second race of the weekend. The first one yesterday took place in overcast and chilly, but still dry conditions. Sadly, we've got the overcast, we've got the chilly, we've got the wind from yesterday, but with that wind has arrived fairly torrential rain that's been coming in all overnight throughout the morning, and I'm reliably informed we'll be sticking around until lunchtime at the very earliest. So get yourselves ready for some wet weather racing around one of the best racetracks in the world. The Ginetta GT Academy drivers, though, are not the most experienced drivers in the world, and we have seen in the past that in the wet conditions it can throw up a few surprise results. Certainly at Oulton Park that was the case. We had a very different look to the results on the wet Easter Monday than we'd had on the Saturday for the first race, and I wonder whether we'll see a similar sort of thing now in race number 2 this weekend. Despite the abysmal conditions, we've got plenty of spectators already making their way into the circuit, many of them probably still hiding away in the restaurant or the coffee shop, but we've got a few hardy souls out in the grandstand, braving the conditions for what hopefully is going to be an entertaining 25 minutes of racing. Yesterday's race, despite being in the dry, was still fairly entertaining, not necessarily as far as the battle for the win was concerned, though. James Nicholas netting his second victory of the season. The Motorsport Vision Scholarship winner from pre-season, his first ever season of racing anything, and he already is a 2-time winner, won one race at Oulton Park in the dry, his very first ever car race, and now his first race around the famous Silverstone Grand Prix circuit, he has been victorious as well. He will therefore start from pole position for this race, actually not because of his win yesterday, but because of his second fastest lap time in qualifying, also being faster than anybody else's. So James Nicholas netting the pole position for both races and looking to try and get a double race victory, but he did go backwards a little bit in the wet at Oulton Park, so I'm intrigued to see whether he's improved his wet weather craft since then, and perhaps we'll be able to get a slightly more favourable result. He was chased home, sort of, by Harry Gamble yesterday, although Harry's chase wasn't all that successful. He was 11 seconds back at the flag after an 11-lap race, so you do the maths. James Nicholas was, on average, about a second a lap quicker than anybody else in that first race. Harry, though, in fairness, had his hands full because he was battling away with the likes of Luke Shaw for that second position, and Luke was within a second of him at the flag. Thomas Balfe came home in fourth, after a brilliant start, and then one of the real revelations of the race was Ali Al-Jafari, who didn't have the best of time of it, really, back at Oulton Park last time out, but made a big step forward in pace here at Silverstone. And we'll wait now and see how he gets on in the wet conditions for race number 2. We've got 2 classes of driver, but these Ginetta GT Academy cars all identical to one another. It's only the drivers that are split into different classes. You've got the rookies, which actually made up the entirety of the top 9 yesterday. All of the top 9 drivers were in the rookie class. The first non-rookie was Julian Wantling, all the way down in 10th position overall, and he was, in the end, the winner of that category by about 5.5 seconds over Amy Tomlinson and Emma Tomlinson, who finished on the podium within that GTA class. But as I said, the cars are all the same. It's just the drivers that are split based upon experience level, essentially. So this is a look at the Silverstone Grand Prix circuit. It is an absolutely fantastic circuit, obviously a real driver's favourite because it is fast, it is flowing, it's wide open, and from our perspective it's great because it provides lots of opportunities to overtake. You've got that really fast run through Copse, through Maggots and Beckett's, a really famous sequence of corners, down the Hanger Straight, and into really the first of the big overtaking opportunities at Stowe. You see lots of side-by-side racing through the club chicane as well, and then you've got the, people still call it new, it's not really new anymore, but the village and loop section on the infield where you always see some lunges, as we did yesterday, and in the wet, lots of different lines that you can play around with through that particular section. Then they head down the Wellington Straight in front of the BRDC clubhouse and through the left-hander at Brooklands and the right-hander at Luffield. Again, lots of different lines, even in the dry through there, so in the wet, you can expect to see drivers experimenting, and then they blast back across the line and do it all over again. It is 3.66 miles of fast-flowing and very challenging racetrack, and as we just saw from a couple of the shots around the circuit, it's very wet. There is a lot of standing water. Most of it is, in fairness, offline, I would say, and of course as the race gets going, hopefully the racing line will clear of the worst of the standing water, but to overtake you're going to have to go off that. You're going to have to run on the less than ideal line. could cause a few drivers some problems, but we do have cars out onto the grid. We're hearing there we'll get 2 green flag laps and it will be a safety car start. Well, actually, we haven't heard officially it will be 2 green flag laps, but I would imagine it will be because of the change of conditions since yesterday, but it will definitely be a safety car start for the GT Academy, which, in fairness, it always is anyway, because they've moved to 2x2 rolling starts this season, but I imagine what they mean by safety car start is it will be a single file, sort of more traditional safety car start, the race essentially starting behind the safety car, and then they'll be released a lap later. Cars pulling up onto the dummy grid, headed by James Nicholas, the Union Flag liveried machine. What a fantastic story that is. James, as I said, brand new to racing, didn't even have a race licence a couple of weeks before Oulton Park, the season opener, and then went out and absolutely smashed it. Qualified on the front row, won the first race of the season, and, well, continued in the same vein yesterday. But in the wet, is he going to be able to fend off the likes of Harry Gamble and Luke Shaw? We've got onboard cameras. How much we'll see out of these, I don't really know, but Mike West, starting 4th on the grid, is carrying, sorry, 3rd on the grid, I should say, is carrying the first of those onboard cameras. He also runs within the Chairman's Cup, does Mike West, so he's in the GTA class, but also in Chairman's Cup even, but he was unfortunately a little bit further down the order than he would have liked after a moment in the early stages of yesterday's race. But he will hopefully be providing us with some interesting onboard footage, but if nothing else, I think it will serve to illustrate the lack of visibility that the drivers are going to have, because unless you're in the lead, you're just going to have a face full of spray. And because it is a high-speed circuit, the faster you go, the worse the spray is, and actually the more important it is that you can see where you're going, but that's not a luxury that the drivers will have unless, as I said, you can get out in front, and that is the one benefit, really, to starting at the front of the grid that James Nicholas has. The downside of that, of course, being that he's the first one to find out how much or little grip there is, where the worst of the standing water is. Everyone else can sort of gauge from his car's behaviour how hard they can push. So it is not necessarily the best place to be out in front in a wet race such as this, especially since race 1 was dry. But they have had some wet running earlier on in the weekend. This is not the first rain that we've had here at Silverstone since the teams rocked up at the back end of the week, so I'm sure they will have had some wet laps, but whether it's been quite this wet, I'm not so sure. So cars then make their way off onto their first green flag lap. Still actually not seen any notification that they're going to have 2, but that is generally the way this works, because the conditions yesterday were dry, conditions today quite clearly not, and so usually they're given 2 laps. I wonder whether that will change because of the length of this circuit, because a lap behind the safety car is going to be well in excess of 4 minutes. And we do have a busy timetable to get through. We've got 3 Ginetta races today. We've got 1 apiece for the GT Academy, the Juniors, and the Ginetta GT Championship. In fact, 2 junior races to come later on today. And so plenty of Ginetta action for you to enjoy. Grid then as follows for our first race. James Nicholas and Harry Gamble on that front row of the grid want to race ahead of Elite Motorsport, with Mike West and Luke Shaw sharing row number 2. Row 3 for Mark Ellman and Mike Taylor. Mark Ellman had some dramas as well towards the end of yesterday's race. Thomas Balfe, meanwhile, made a brilliant start yesterday and will need to do the same from the outside of row number 4 alongside Gareth Thomas. Then it's Ali Al-Jafali and Julian Wantling. Julian Wantling, the GTA class winner yesterday. Amy Tomlinson and Pete Thompson, meanwhile, share row 6. Peter Thompson was actually the Chairman's Cup winner in race number 1. Emma Tomlinson and Lucie Hodgson are next. Lucie Tomlinson starts 15th alongside Paul Thomas, and then the back row of the grid is where you will find Gilbert Verdian, the new driver into the championship, still finding his feet, hopefully going to be getting quicker as the weekend goes on. So, down through Vale, first time that we've had a chance to look at this part of the circuit, and it's not great, but it's not that bad actually. The drainage here at Silverstone is certainly up there with the best in the United Kingdom, and it has cleared, I think, the worst of the standing water. As I said, offline it's fairly sketchy, but on the racing line at least it doesn't look too bad, so I think we should be good to go racing. But these cars don't have ABS, they don't have traction control. They do at least this year have a new wet weather tyre, which they've not had in the past, so that will hopefully give the drivers a little bit more confidence. But bear in mind, we're dealing with very powerful, very unpredictable cars, and generally very inexperienced drivers here. This is very much sort of pitched as the entry-level series for Ginetta, almost replacing in a way what the G40 Cup used to be, and that was obviously for a very different kind of car. The G40, much less powerful, much smaller, lighter, These cars will handle and behave very differently, but it still is very much the first place you want to go, really, if you want to race Ginettas, unless, of course, you're between the ages of 14 and 17, because then you can go into the Ginetta Junior Championship, and they do have those 2 races still to come later on. But if you've missed the boat, so to speak, as far as junior racing is concerned, this is the place to go, and it's nice to see that this championship in its 3rd year now is still attracting big grids and lots of very promising talent. We've seen an awful lot of drivers move up from the GT Academy series into things like the Ginetta GT Championship, which also uses a Ginetta G56, but a much more powerful and sort of race-prepared version. And we have seen a few drivers this year actually move up into that category. Nick White and Matt Shaw in particular, who were the top 2 in this series last year, both now going great guns in the GT Championship proper. So you do learn a lot. They're hard cars to drive, but that's the way it should be, really, because you learn everything you need to about car control, about racecraft, and you can then apply that into whatever series it is that you decide to jump up into next. Like West then, showing us round Brooklands and Luffield. And this is the line I think that they're going to be taking through Luffield in the wet. The wet racing line is usually fairly different from the dry racing line. In the dry, you would hunt the apex. You'd take the shortest route through the corners. In the wet, though, you want to try and avoid the rubbered up racing line, because rubber, when it's wet, gets very, very slippery. So they try and stay off the rubber and run as wide as they can. But that brings with it its own set of challenges, because you're that bit closer to the edge of the road. Conditions where you don't really have a huge amount of grip, obviously. They are getting a second green flag lap. The time, by the way, had already started ticking down, I believe, because my timing screen is showing 21 minutes and 40 seconds left of the 25. So I think they actually started the time at the beginning of that first safety car lap, but the lap counter is still showing 0 laps completed, so I'm not entirely sure. But at the moment, we are racing, technically, but still behind the safety car. It did take them the best part of 4 minutes to complete that lap, or 3 minutes, let's say. So you can anticipate a similar length of time for this second lap, but I reckon we'll go racing at the end of it. So we won't have too much longer to wait to see who's going to master these wet conditions. I think James Nicholas will be quite happy, though, actually, that time has already started to tick, because that's a few less laps now that he has to worry about fending them all off, managing the conditions, not making any mistakes. No racing driver wants to win a race entirely behind the safety car, of course, but certainly has provided a slightly more stress-free start to the race. Oh, someone's in the wall, though. Someone is in the wall heading down the hanger straight, and I think that was Luke Shaw who's dropped it coming out onto the hanger straight. It is Luke Shaw, the number 21 car, and that car's been in the concrete wall on driver's left, so even behind the safety car. Just to illustrate my point, it is treacherous out there, and unfortunately, Luke Shaw is the man demonstrating that. Now, he's trying to get the car going again, but I don't think he's going to have much success. From what I saw from the onboard there, through the murk and the spray, I think that was fairly significant contact with that wall, and it is a concrete wall as well. It's not an Armco barrier, not a tyre wall. It is solid concrete, and that will have done quite a bit of damage, I'm afraid, to the front of his Ginetta G56, and Luke is getting out of the car and will be absolutely furious with that. Slams the door, storms away, glances back at the front of the car to see how bad the damage is, and well, it doesn't look terrible, but there will definitely be some damage behind the bodywork there, possibly steering damage, looking at the angle of that right front wheel. Luke's going to hang around now and just assist the marshals, maybe with the recovery. Let's see if we can figure out what happened to Luke Shaw then. Here we go. This is from outside. Fourth car in line. And he's just looped it, trying to get some heat into the tyres. You can see he was weaving around there. And as you're weaving, you're on and off the throttle. Like I said, these cars don't have traction control. And so very easy to lose control. It looks like he's having a bit of a laugh about it now with the marshal. And he's going to wander over now just to make sure that everything's okay. But yeah, that is surprisingly easy to do, I can imagine. Even in these conditions, it looks a little bit embarrassing when you do it. But in the wet, in cars like these, very easy to spin those rear tyres. Now, unfortunately, what this means is we're not going to go racing this time, I'm almost certain, because that car will need recovering. And that's going to take another few minutes. So before you know it, we're going to be halfway through this race, and we won't have actually seen the green flag yet. But shame that for Luke Shaw, because he was pretty rapid yesterday, made his way onto the podium outright and was chasing down Harry Gamble in the closing stages, actually. So another couple of laps, I think I made the point that he could have finished second even. But now, the team left with a repair job. And the marshals left with the unenviable task of going out into the wet conditions, trudging through the mud, and helping to get that car out of the way. So one more lap at least will be required behind the safety car. And James Nicholas will be rubbing his hands with glee, really, although, as we've just seen, even trundling around behind the safety car, you're not guaranteed to stay out of trouble. But at least he now knows that when we do go racing, you won't have to defend that lead for too long. Harry Gamble, though, of course, will be chomping at the bit to get going here, because he will know that the form book tells us he should have a good shot at winning this race, really. He already has one race win, which came in actually not fully wet conditions, I seem to recall, because it was the third race at Oulton Park. I think the track had sort of largely dried out by that point, but or certainly wasn't as wet as it had been for race 2 of the weekend. But he, I think, will be fancying his chances here, Harry Gamble, and Luke Shaw would have been as well, but sadly not going to get to see what he's capable of. There is the number 2 car heading through. That is the newbie, Gilbert Verdian. Again, we'll probably be quite happy, actually, to have a few laps behind the safety car just to judge the conditions. His first wet race this will be, I would imagine. Mike West, meanwhile, finds himself still in 3rd place, but now not with Luke Shaw behind him, but Mark Ellman. And again, that's probably a bit of a relief for Mike West, because he knows that Luke Shaw is pretty quick and was probably going to cause him some headaches when the race did get going. Drivers all staying well over to the right-hand side. See the safety car there taking that right-hand side of the road to try and usher everybody else away from the recovery scene. James Nicholas wasn't particularly paying attention to that, but everybody else sort of staying to drivers right. Really good work by the marshals to get that car up on the flatbed truck so quickly, actually. I feared that this might be a couple of laps behind the safety car, but if they can get the truck out of the way quickly, might just go racing this time. That would be good. Mike West certainly will be keen to get going. Mark Ellman there in behind him. Mark Ellman is 2nd in the GTA class championship, behind Julian Wantling, and after yesterday's race he's now 40 points behind Julian Wantling, but that's because he had a spin late in the going and had been running, I think, ahead of Julian, or at least only a place or so behind him, so starts ahead of Julian Wantling in this race. There is the number 3 machine of Julian, the blue and white car just going through with the red roof. Top 2 in the GTA class. Early days in the championship, of course. It's a 21 race season. It takes in all of the British GT events this year, plus the Anglesey G-Fest in the summer, where I believe each of the championships will have 4 races around the Anglesey International Circuit. So that's GT Academy, GT Championship and Ginetta Juniors as well. That's going to be a fantastic event up in the north of Wales. A track that I would venture Ginetta probably haven't raced at before. I certainly can't remember a time that Ginetta have raced at Anglesey, unless maybe the G20s did back in the day. Someone, I'm sure, will be typing a message to me already correcting me if I'm wrong, but I think that might be the first visit. Certainly it will be, obviously, for things like the GT Championship and the GT Academy, because they're relatively new series, but yeah, I wonder if that is going to be a first visit into North Wales for the northern-based car manufacturer. There is their latest offering, the G56 safety car, and the lights are out on the G56 safety car. That is the best news we've had all day. We're about to go racing then with what's probably going to be about 14 minutes left on the clock. And James Nicholas suddenly now needs to snap himself back into the zone, because he's been trundling around for the last 3 laps, not really having to think too hard about anything. And now he's got to try and execute a safety car restart. Harry Gamble is doing his best to stay with him, look, and stays right in the wheel tracks of the PalmerSport liveried car. These two, though, distancing themselves already from Mike West, who's not really on his toes here, is he? James Nicholas almost sort of just sticking at the same pace as the safety car, which isn't really normally the way of doing it. Now he slows down coming out of Luffield. The safety car pulls into the pit lane. James isn't allowed to overtake that safety car until it's in the pit lane, which it now is, but he's still not actually accelerated up to speed. Now he does, going through Woodcote, and that was actually a pretty effective race restart from James Nicholas, who will lead them down towards Copse Corner for the first time at speed, with Harry Gamble in behind. And, well, there are others behind Harry Gamble, I assure you. You just can't see them through the spray. There is Mike West, there is Mark Ellman, having a little peek to the inside line, actually, into Copse. That's brave. There's more side-by-side action further behind. That was Emma Tomlinson trying to nip up the inside of the number 6 machine of Peter Thompson, but Nicholas leads them down into Maggots and Beckett's for the first time of asking. The real battle is for third, though, isn't it? Mike West actually struggling to go with those top two, and under big threat now from Mark Ellman and from Mike Taylor. So Mike West wasn't all that lively on the restart, and now also struggling a little bit for grip. So too is the race leader, though, and here comes Harry Gamble alongside James Nicholas down the hanger straight, and he had so much momentum out onto that part of the circuit after the slide from Nicholas that he's going to clear the number 24 car before we're halfway down towards Stowe Corner. So Harry Gamble goes to the lead, and unfortunately James Nicholas didn't even last half a lap out in front once the race restarted. Here comes the fight for third, still Mike West in third position, but Mike Taylor now nips up the inside of Mark Ellman for fourth, and then tries to make it a double move to draw alongside West for third place, and he will make that move stick, actually. So Mike Taylor is on the charge as they head down through the Vale and into the club chicane. Ellman battling away now with somebody else. Who's that getting into the mix? Gareth Thomas, I think, number 77, sweeping round the outside of Mark Ellman's number 88. So some drivers a little more at home in the conditions than others, a few of them getting very tail happy out of club. As I said, no traction control, very limited grip. You've got to be measured with your throttle application. A few of them maybe being a little bit more vigorous than others. So Gamble leads there, Nicholas second, Taylor third. And this is the fight for fourth position, Mike West and Gareth Thomas. Gareth Thomas started 8th on the grid, so well, 7th I suppose after the demise of Luke Shaw, but still gaining a few places from where he started. Goes Mark Ellman. Not been such a good start today from Thomas Balfe as it was yesterday. You can just see him there in the number 59 machine. Not actually going forwards at all on the restart, but he's caught up to this group now, has a big twitch on the apex. You can see that he got onto the normal racing line, which just doesn't have the grip in these conditions. Mark Ellman found some grip though and slots up the inside of Gareth Thomas. That was nicely done. And in fact, I think he's having a go at Mike West as well as we head underneath the bridge in front of the BRDC grandstand and down towards the braking zone at Brooklands. Not actually close enough to Mike West, but he did get past Gareth Thomas. There's another driver now joining in as well, and that is Ali Al-Jafari up the inside of Thomas Balfe, and that was a real brave move. Can Balfe hang on around the outside? He'll have the inside for Luffield if he does, but that's not necessarily the place to be in the wet. So I think Jafari, if he just stands his ground on the outside, should come out of the turn still in front. Balfe, though, is not able to take the racing line because Jafari was still there, and Ali Al-Jafari will go through. So that was persistence around the outside for Jafari. He trusted that that's where the grip was, and in the end that proved to be the case. So Harry Gamble leads by 1.9 seconds now over James Nicholas in second position. Third place is Taylor, fourth place for West, but for how much longer? Because Mark Ellman's up the inside through Cobb's Corner, and Gareth Thomas had a run on the pair of them actually. This is on board with West as we head down towards Maggots and Beckett's. There's a car somewhere to our right. There might even be one to the left by now. No, he's obviously fended off Mark Ellman. And actually takes the apex through Beckett's as well, so he's seen off the challenge from Gareth Thomas for now. Thomas up ahead of Ellman, so change for fifth place. Gareth Thomas had a bit of a yo-yo first lap or so of racing, hasn't he? But he's now starting to pick his way back through again. So they splash their way onto the hanger straight. Ali Al-Jafari now setting his sights on Mark Ellman. And looks to the outside line, heading towards Stowe Corner. Draws almost level, and again, the outside should be the better place to be if Ali is feeling brave. Ellman's quite late on the brakes, gets into the corner first, and actually Gareth Thomas makes a mistake in front, so Ellman nips up the inside, and an even bigger mistake made by Mike West, who's in the gravel. So Mike West pointing the wrong way, and you could sort of see that coming. He'd been slipping backwards ever since the drop of the green flag, and did not seem particularly at home in these conditions. So West off the road means that this is now the fight for fourth. Mark Ellman is back in front of Gareth Thomas. That's 2 times they've swapped places on this lap alone. And it might be a third now as Thomas nips up the inside through the second part of club. Good racing between these two. And Ali Al-Jafari just desperately trying to find an opening to join in as well. They're still side by side in front of him though, as they head down the Sir Lewis Hamilton straight into Abbey Corner. Ellman backs out of it, and that does open the door for Jafari up the inside line. And the Elite Motorsport driver is going to slip through, I think. Nicely done. Another place gain for Ali Al-Jafari, but we are going safety car, and that can only be because Mike West's car is still stuck in the gravel down at Stowe. So the safety car scrambled, and that means the race will be neutralised. It also means that this sizable margin that Harry Gamble has pulled will now evaporate. Now, Mike West's car is no longer in the gravel. It's been pushed out by the marshals, so A little bit trigger happy on the safety car button maybe, but at least that means we should only need 1 lap behind the safety car, and then we will get going again. It's a difficult situation that for race control, because they can only go off the information that's being given them by the marshals. So the marshals will have seen Mike West's car in the gravel. They have to assess fairly quickly what sort of recovery they're going to need, whether the car can be pushed out or whether it needs a tow. If it needs a tow, of course, then that means we need a safety car, because you can't be sending recovery vehicles onto the track whilst the race is live. And it was only when they got to the car, I think, that they realised, actually, no, we can probably push it out. But because it's wet, the gravel a bit more compact makes that a bit easier. So into Stowe corner he goes, and I think just catches a bit of standing water, maybe. Might have locked the brakes anyway. It was a slightly strange one, that, because he was nowhere near the racing line, which is the slipperiest part of the track. But just locked the rear axle, I think, and around he went. So Mike West will rejoin. Now, some championships have a rule that says if you're given outside assistance to get back into the race, you're actually not allowed to continue in the race, but I would put money on the fact that he's going to try and continue if he can. So he's at the back, but will be wanting to try and gain some places as and when we get the race restarted. So Harry Gamble then the leader, James Nicholas second, and has another chance maybe to try and retaliate against Gamble, but I just think Gamble is a bit more confident in these conditions. But actually, so far, James Nicholas doing much better than he did in the wet at Oulton Park, so he has made strides forward. I would venture Silverstone may be a slightly easier track to drive in the wet. Very easy for me to say from my warm, dry commentary box, obviously, but Oulton Park is a challenging circuit. It's a lot narrower and a lot more undulating, so the water tends to collect in some of the dips around the Oulton circuit, whereas here at Silverstone, maybe it's a bit less of a challenge. I'm not saying it's easy, but that perhaps is explaining why James Nicholas, plus the extra experience that he's gained, is able to hang on at least a second place, but no one really able to live with the pace of Harry Gamble. His fastest lap, a 2:47.4. The next fastest driver was James Nicholas with a 48.0, so 6/10 slower, and they'd only done 1 full flying lap, really, unimpeded by safety cars. So you would probably say that Harry Gamble could go a little bit quicker, actually. May yet get the chance to do so, because I think we should go racing again at the end of this lap with what's going to be about 5 minutes left on the clock. Reminder there on the left-hand side of your screen that Mark Ellman still leads the GTA class ahead of Emma, Amy and Lucie Tomlinson in that order. Julian Wantling down in 5th in class, and Thomas Balfe has got bigger dramas because his bonnet's come loose. So Thomas Balfe, who I've not seen get involved in any contact, although he's a long way behind the rest of the pack. No, he's not. That's for Abbey, isn't it? So Peter Thompson goes through. He's slowing. This is what happened. Did it come loose, or did he get into the back of Mark Ellman? Are they all going to concertina together? They are, and he's not noticed, and crunch straight into the back. And very reminiscent of the antics we saw in the Chinese Grand Prix a week ago. Thomas Balfe, unfortunately, not quite realising that the cars ahead was slowing. In fairness, why would you expect them to down the straight? And he ran straight into the back of Mark Ellman's car. So, unfortunately for Thomas, we had an onboard camera in his car, so caught him red-handed there. But he's going to have to dive for the pit lane, because although the bonnet seems to have dropped back down again at low speed, as soon as the speed picks up, he's going to find that it's going to start obscuring his vision once again. In fact, it already is. You can see in the background heading down the Wellington Straight. Anyway, none of this will be bothering Harry Gamble, who, with 5 minutes left on the clock, is about to try and show James Nicholas how it's done with regards to a safety car restart. James went very late, remember, when he was in the lead. I wonder whether Gamble might go for a different strategy. Thomas Balfe is definitely destined for the pit lane, so we're going to see a shuffle of the order behind. What's going to happen between the race leaders? They all go right to the edge of the racetrack there, trying to just get the best run out of Luffield possible. And Gamble actually makes a mistake. He stepped on the loud pedal, but a bit too aggressively, and had a big, big slide. Luckily for him, no overtaking is allowed before you cross the timing line, so James Nicholas couldn't really take advantage of that, but it does mean that James is a bit closer to Harry than Harry would have liked. So across the line we go then, 4 minutes 20 left on the clock, time for 2 more laps then, I reckon. And can James Nicholas do anything about Harry Gamble? Out of Copse Corner they go, slightly wider line taken by the second placed man. Gamble retains the advantage, heading for Maggots and Beckett's. It's the 7th lap of the race then. Green flags waving once more at Silverstone, and keep an eye on the 4th and 5th place drivers, Gareth Thomas and Ali Al-Jafari. They've both looked very quick so far in this race, and the race leader is sideways. Harry Gamble saves it but loses the lead, and that was one of the best bits of car control you will see all day. Through into 2nd place will go Mike Taylor, actually. So Mike Taylor up into P2, but that was a huge moment for Harry Gamble, and James Nicholas is back in the lead of the race. Well, he can hardly believe his luck, probably, because it didn't look as though he had the pace to challenge Gamble. Gamble may still bounce back from that, but that was very near to disaster for both of them, actually, because I did worry that if Gamble had lost it completely, James Nicholas might have got caught up in that too, but the crisis averted for now, and Gamble still has a chance to get back up there. That was Jafari off in the background, I think, from 5th position. Yes, it was. Maybe didn't go fully off the track, but certainly went very wide and lost all of his momentum and a few places with it. But Nicholas leads them through the club chicane for the 7th time. Can maybe Mike Taylor now snatch a race victory, or can Nicholas hang on and claim a 2nd win of the year? Well, Taylor gets it all wrong through club, so Harry Gamble immediately sees a chance to recapture 2nd position. But we've only got a lap and a half to go now. He needs to get on with this if he's going to go back after James Nicholas for the win, and he hasn't yet got back ahead of Taylor because Mike carries a lot more speed through Abbey Corner. Nearly goes off the track as a result, but actually does manage to come off the corner. Still ahead, then he has a slide. As soon as they start running on the racing line at any sort of speed, they just have no grip, and they're getting completely sideways. That's all 3 of these leaders now have had a moment in a similar fashion. But James Nicholas weathering the storm for now and finds himself back in front with just over a lap of this 2nd race of the weekend to go. Gamble nipping back up the inside of Taylor through Aintree. That's a brave place to be riding the curb in these conditions, but it might just work for him. He took the gamble, and with it, he's going to claim 2nd place, I think, because he's got his nose in front heading underneath the bridge, and that is the inside line into Brooklands Corner. As long as he doesn't find a slippery patch of tarmac, Harry Gamble should be back into P2, which he is. And Elite Motorsport will now be cheering him on over this final lap to chase down the race leader James Nicholas and claim a race victory that really looked to be heading Harry Gamble's way pretty easily, honestly, until that moment. So off Luffield Corner they go then. Let's see what the gap is going to be. James Nicholas will lead for the 2nd time in this race. Or actually for the 1st time at race speed across the timing line. He leads by 1.6 seconds, and that was a new fastest lap for Nicholas, a 2:44.9, which is quite a bit quicker, actually, 2 seconds quicker than Harry Gamble had gone earlier on in the race. So maybe track conditions are improving. It doesn't look like it, does it? That is Ali Al-Jafari, meanwhile, back up the inside of Peter Thompson, excuse me, for 6th position. Farley back into 6th. Where was he running before that moment? 4th or 5th, I think, wasn't he? So a bit of work to do to get back to where he was. Back into Beckett's they go, but what's happening at the front of the field? At the end of the Hanger Straight, we will get the sector times through for Sector 1, and we'll be able to see whether Gamble is catching Nicholas or whether James is fending him off. As this battle further back continues to rage on. There are the leaders. Well, it's definitely coming down, isn't it? Yes, by about 3/4 of a second in the 1st sector alone. So Harry Gamble is well up for the fight. He's within a second of the leader again and still has a few more overtaking opportunities to come on this final lap. Here comes one of the Tomlinsons. Number 47 is Emma Tomlinson, running in 8th place at the moment as Mike West is in the pit lane. And here is Mike West. Not a huge surprise. I did suspect he'd have to do that, having deposited himself in the gravel earlier on. What is going on out in front? The 2nd sector time will be in very shortly, but I suspect we don't really need the timing screen at this point to tell us that Harry Gamble is the faster of the 2, but is he going to run out of time? Well, actually, he wasn't the faster of the 2 in the 2nd sector. James Nicholas fractionally quicker. Only half a 10th, but at least that has steadied the ship a little bit. Gamble no longer taking time out of him. Mark Ellman looks destined now for a GTA class win. That will help him in his quest to close in on championship leader Julian Wantling, who is 3rd in the class at the moment. Emma Tomlinson sits 2nd in the GTA category. Village and the Loop we go then for the final time of asking. And James Nicholas claim his 1st win in the wet. His what will now be 3rd win in the class this season. Let's find out. Well, maybe not, because he's gone wide out of entry and Gamble's gone through. Harry Gamble up the inside line. James Nicholas must have made a mistake there, because he was about a second clear the last time we saw him. He's going to try and fight back round the outside, though. Terrific stuff from James Nicholas. You would not think this is only his 5th ever car race. He is taking the fight to Harry Gamble. He's over the curb. He's on the grass. He's got the inside line. It's all out of shape, but can he block the route for the Elite Motorsport driver to get the switch back? He's going to try it. This could be a drag race to the line, but I think that James Nicholas is just going to hang on with some brilliant ballsy driving on the final lap of the race. James Nicholas claims the victory and takes the checkered flag at Silverstone in the end by just under 0.3 of a second. That was fantastic stuff. How he fended off Harry Gamble, I do not know. And I'm not even sure Harry Gamble really knows how, because he was definitely ahead going into the braking zone at Brooklands. But the wider line in the wet seemed to be the grippier side of the road, and that worked well for James Nicholas. So Nicholas gets the victory, Gamble second, third place goes the way of Mike Taylor. Then Thomas, Elman and Jafali come through next. So Elman does get the win in the GTA class. The Chairman's Cup, by the way, won by Peter Thompson. But it is James Nicholas who gets his 3rd class victory, and I believe I'm right in saying his 2nd overall victory of the season. And this is only his 2nd ever race event in a car. That is really remarkable, and especially given how much he struggled in the wet at Oulton Park, to see him now really take the fight to Gamble was very impressive. Yes, Gamble had that mistake on the restart, but James Nicholas didn't. He drove flawlessly there. Even after he made the mistake at Aintree, he was able to bounce back from it. And the PalmerSport-backed driver is well and truly proving that he deserved to win that scholarship. Oh, someone's in the gravel. That's Ali Al-Jafali. That's on the in-lap to the pit lane, and he has got himself stuck in the gravel at Stoke Corner. That's not going to go down very well, because that's going to delay our next session and give the marshals down at Stoke Corner a little bit more work to do. They've already had to clear one car out of that gravel trap, and now even after the race is finished, they will have to spring back into action again. James Nicholas, though, the race winner, and, well, it wasn't a comfortable margin of victory by any means, but that was still a very, very classy drive, and James Nicholas gets the victory in the end by just under 0.3 of a second from Harry Gamble second, and Mike Taylor in third. Gareth Thomas and Ali Al-Jafali complete the top 5 ahead of Mark Elman. Peter Thompson, the Chairman's Cup victor ahead of Emma Tomlinson, Julian Watling, and Amy Tomlinson in 10th. Lucie Tomlinson was 11th ahead of Paul Thomas, and Lucie Hodgson, Gilbert Verdian, with Mike West, Thomas Balfe and Luke Shaw all failing to finish the race. Luke, of course, ending up in the barriers really before the race had ever started. Well, brilliant stuff from James Nicholas then, who gets a victory here at Silverstone, and that will help him massively now to close in on Harry Gamble in the Rookie Class Drivers' Championship after a terrific battle between the two of them here in the very wet conditions at Silverstone.